Well, I can't say it's surprising, but yesterday the Biden administration, for the first time, bombed Syria. Now, the reason why this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone is because Biden ran on being, more hawkish than Trump, saying that the problem with Trump is that he was disengaged from the world and he abandoned our allies and he sided with our enemies. And of course, Assad is a friend to Mr. Putin and the Ayatollah, and even Trump bombed Assad in Syria. So you would think that at the very least, Biden would do just that as well, and then go even further. Because if bombing Syria is too pro-Russia, well then, I guess Biden would have to do something even more. And, and in the first week of Biden's administration, we were getting headlines out of Syria that there were U.S. convoys moving into the country. I didn't cover it at the time because I wasn't sure necessarily where that story was going. I wanted to wait and see if anything else happened, or if those convoys were just doing the silly little patrols up and down the highways in Syria, which was going on under the Trump administration too, though he was trying to get people out. And then, you had the military working behind his back to try and conceal things, and, that whole mess. Now, Biden did not directly bomb Assad's forces in Syria. He did not bomb the Syrian government or a government building or the Syrian military. He bombed, I believe the phrase they're using is Iranian-backed militias, which essentially means any Shiite who is not a part of a established government. So it doesn't mean necessarily that they actually have any sort of official backing by the Iranian government or not. We never know that with these groups. With the Houthis, for example, for years they called them an Iranian-backed militia before they ever received any official help from Iran. And the reason why they started working with Iran, because the Houthis used to be U.S. allies, as I've gone over before, is just because, the entire U.S.-backed world order was turned against the Houthis. So the only people they had left to work with were the Iranians. But in this case, I'm a little more okay assuming that this was an actual Iranian-backed militia, because this isn't Syria, where Iran is actually operating and is actively assisting with one side of the conflict there. Iran has people on the ground there. They have Hezbollah, which basically is Iran's 51st state. I'm okay saying that. I definitely think that that's the case. Although I don't believe that this particular group that was bombed was Hezbollah, or else I think they would have, that would have been, that'd be in the headline, because I think Hezbollah is just as much of a boogeyman as Iran is. Now, the official justification for this attack was that there was an attack by a, again, quote-unquote Iranian-backed militia in Iraq against some U.S. base there. I don't know if this is in reference to what happened in Mosul a few weeks ago, but I don't think it matters that much, because, again, the context of this, what Biden is doing here is disappointed, I guess, as some of his supporters are, though I don't know why, because, again, Biden ran on being more hawkish than Trump, and this kind of stuff is in line with what Trump was doing. And I opposed it when Trump did it, certainly. That was the day, I believe it was back in 2017, when Trump first bombed Syria. The media said, this is the day that Trump became president. He's finally presidential. He did something that a president would do. I mean, it was disgusting how much they were fawning over Trump for, murdering people. Actually, I'm not sure if how many people died in that attack, that first one, because I believe that Trump, bombed an airstrip or something in Syria. I don't know, and some planes. I don't know if he actually killed anyone, because I think that they might have even had forewarning, because it was a Syrian Air Force base. But anyway, there were plenty of other people killed throughout the Trump years by bombs. So again, from Biden, I would expect him to do everything that Trump did, plus more. So that means more death, more destruction, and more suffering. But, I guess I should say I'm pleasantly surprised by everything that's the reaction that I've seen from left and right to this attack. It seems like it is overwhelmingly negative sentiment that is, boiling over here. And, just the fact that people are hearing about it at all, to me, is significant, because I'm not used to, the media covering any of this sort of stuff and people caring about it, or people, even commenting on it. But as I've said in the past, when it comes to the war issue, it's a losing issue for the establishment. If this gets covered, the more this is covered, the more people hate it and the more people get angry about it. I mean, to me, it's such a welcome departure from the usual, culture war nonsense, because it exposes. I mean, when you look at this, all the rhetoric about how, Joe Biden, he's kind, and he doesn't send mean tweets, and he supports our LGBTQ XYZ rights. It reminds me of that meme that, the red-pilled leftists like to pass around, and it's an image of a plane dropping a bunch of bombs, and it says Republicans, and then there's next to it is a picture that says Democrats, and it's a picture of the very same plane, but it has a bunch of decals and stickers that it's like a rainbow flag and hashtag BLM and trans rights and all this nonsense. The point being that all of the ridiculous gender ideology and the race huxing, all that is a wonderful distraction for the Democrats to try and throw red meat at the left so that they can not get angry about real issues. Because on the one hand, here you have the Democrats saying, hey, we're going to stand up against whiteness and white supremacy, while halfway around the world they're bombing brown people into the Stone Age. What you really need to worry about are racial microaggressions, like if you refer to Jeremy Lin as a chink in the armor. But the irony of that is that the very existence of the phrase microaggressions implies that there's such a thing as macroaggressions. And what does a macroaggression look like? Well, it looks like a bunch of bombs falling from American planes, Raytheon bombs, onto the people of Syria. And I think that if you brought them up, if you brought this up in that context, if this was regular news that was covered every day, I think that even, your far left-wingers, and, the red-pilled ones certainly are, would be far more concerned with macroaggressions than microaggressions. And I think that the ghouls like Amy Siskind, who actually had the gall to come out and praise this action yesterday and say, look, Biden just bombed a bunch of people in Syria, but he didn't send out any mean tweets when he did it. Isn't that wonderful? That's my president. I trust his foreign policy team. And then she probably, ended with hashtag Black Lives Matter or something like that. Here you have a woman who has, a rainbow flag emoji in her Twitter name. She's supposed to signal to your average leftist, hey, I'm one of you, I'm your ally. But there you have her, clearly leading thy lamb astray. And thankfully, I don't think that it worked. I think that this woman was universally mocked, and that, people who are exposed to all the information, see through this stuff pretty easily, because it's, I don't know how much more obvious it could be if you have all the information in front of you. It's very clear, what the serious, human rights concern of our time should be. The supposed white supremacists that these people should be concerned about are not the folks in the trailer park, it's the folks in the Pentagon. And so maybe, just maybe, now that Donald Trump is gone, since, for 4 years under Donald Trump, since Trump was perceived to be anti-war, even though he wasn't that much, he was the best president of my lifetime as far as foreign policy is concerned, but that's not saying much. The leftists, or I should say the liberals, the people who don't think too deeply about politics who are on the left, they felt compelled to be pro-war. But now that somebody who they don't like is in there and is being overtly pro-war, relative to Donald Trump, perhaps that will make it more socially acceptable for people on the left to come out and oppose war. Maybe, we will get some kind of a return to an anti-war left, as well as the budding anti-war right. Because the right-wingers at this point have a greater political motivation to move in the anti-war direction, since, as I said, Biden, relative to Trump, is supposed to be, the big hawk, and they have 4 years to stew over all of the military's actions under Biden's leadership. Now, I don't know what made this story pop up and all of a sudden break through the usual media firewall that is put on all these war stories, but I hope that more continue to pop up in the future. I hope that this is the beginning of people left and right uniting on this issue, perhaps, and getting enraged with their government. Perhaps if this is brought to the forefront and this becomes a major issue, the major issue that it should have been for the last 15 years or so, then there could be some hope that perhaps the next presidential candidate could be pressured and ultimately have sort of a mandate for ending the violence. I think that in America there is an infinitesimally small constituency of people who support global hegemony. I think that the average American overwhelmingly believes, like Jeane Kirkpatrick did back in at the end of the Cold War, that America should go back to being a normal country in a normal time, or in the way that that Trump put it, people put America first before these other places. Because remember, the neocon pitch was not, hey, we're going to go over to the Middle East and bomb these people into the Stone Ages. Necessarily, it was, hey, we're going to go over to the Middle East and clean it up, and we're going to make them just like little Americas, and we're going to fix their countries. And there might be some people who still believe that that's what the military is doing over there. Of course, the more that this stuff gets reported on, I think the less and less people will believe that. But nevertheless, I think it's easy enough to unite the people who thought maybe at first, that the wars were a noble cause that went awry, and the people who have always thought that the wars were, an evil money-making scheme for some very evil and well-connected people. But then again, I guess I should temper my hopes, because there have been periods in this country where there was a strong anti-war movement. And even then, the wars did not end. But I think the difference back then is that the anti-war movement was partisan. It was polarizing. It was something that only really the left believed in. And perhaps you could say that now more than ever, the idea that there could be some sort of a bipolar or bipartisan anti-war movement is ridiculous, considering, more ridiculous than ever considering the level of polarization. But I'm just saying that the mood on both sides seems to be very much, conducive to such a thing. I think if you had people on the left standing up to Joe Biden and saying, hey, what you're doing is wrong, I don't think that you would have all of a sudden the right wing of this country decide, what, we do like war again, go Joe. Until that, does happen, I'm going to remain optimistic that it won't. But nevertheless, even if that doesn't happen, the next financial crisis, in my opinion, will bring an end to all the wars. I don't see how they continue paying for them after the system breaks this time, because they're not taking any time to let the machine cool down, as I've gone over in the past. And when you do that, if you just keep the engine running constantly as the temperature keeps rising and rising, eventually something will break. And if America's economic engine experiences catastrophic failure, there's going to be no way to sustain the war machine. So with that said, I think I'll leave things off there for today.